さあ、それでは第3部
Ladies and
セッション
gentlemen, we're going to start the panel session 2, entitled Development and Promotion of Okinawa from the 51st year on. I would like to introduce the panelists. In the center, the former Governor of Okinawa, Keiichi Inamine. And the former chairman of Okinawa Development Council, Dr. Motoshige Itoh. The chair of Okinawa Association of Corporate Executives, Ms. Miki Fuchibe. The moderator will be Ms. Keiko Iizuka, senior political writer, editorial writer of the Yomiuri Shimbun. Over to you, Ms. Iizuka. Thank you very much. So we would like to start panel session 2. It is about the economic and development after 50 years of the reversion of Okinawa. What will be the future that will unfold before our eyes? And we would like to invite Mr. Inamine, the former governor of Okinawa Prefecture, to make a presentation. As I mentioned in session 2, the time is going to be very tight. So the first presentation will be given to each of you for 8 minutes, and the longest 10 minutes. Then the floor will be open for questions. And first, I would like to invite Dr. Itoh to make a presentation. This is Itoh speaking. Thank you very much. I would like to apply 2 viewpoints for my presentation. But prior to that, I think it was about 13 years ago, I served as I was invited to serve as the chair of the Okinawa Development and Council. On that occasion, there was an intensive discussion, and what was really impressed on that occasion is that I think Okinawa was needed and to promote economic development equal to the mainland, in particular infrastructure development. That was how it was viewed. But from that point on, I think many people started to think about Okinawa serving as a kind of a Japan's frontier. In the actual discussions during the same period, we also paid attention to that aspect. And looking back, I think there are a lot of important items that I have to share with you, in particular 2 of them, which I would like to emphasize. For overall Japan as well, it is important. And secondly, I think it was also discussed in the first sessions, the geopolitical environment and changes that we witness around Okinawa. In first, about the whole nation viewpoint, it happens to be that we celebrate the 50th anniversary of the reversion. And Japan's remodeling development and plan, which was released by former Prime Minister Tanaka 50 years ago. And then the Garden City Initiative launched by Mr. Kishida. And there is always a discussion between the similarity and the difference between the 2 initiatives. I will not go into the details of them, but Tokyo's centralization is going to be the centerpiece of those arguments. And so airports, railroads, and highways were built, aside from Okinawa, in many cities around Japan. They all grown into mini Tokyos. And there was a similarity between across the cities, and that supported a high economic growth period. And then there was a momentum as such for the economic growth. That was quite impressive. During the high economic growth period of Japan started from the 1960s through 1973, when the oil shock hit Japan. So during this period, I think it was the heyday of economic growth. And during this period, the Okinawa was returned to Japan's sovereignty. And seizing on this kind of historical significance, we started the discussion at Okinawa Development and Council. How's the employment and the economic level? How is it going to be raised equal to the mainland? There was such a discussion. But there was the bubble burst in the early 1990s. This kind of mindset started to change. because nobody wanted to become another Tokyo. Not like in the past days. The uniqueness of each city and the region needs to be emphasized. Instead of just becoming mini Tokyo, how the uniqueness of each city and the locality is going to be emphasized. Looking around the whole Japan, uniformity, instead of uniformity, but diverse Japan, how is this going to be created? That's such a viewpoint had penetrated the whole population. I think the Garden City initiative launched by Prime Minister Kishida is quite unique and quite interesting. It is the Tokyo centralized development initiative should be fundamentally reviewed. The industrial, the base, and the community life needed to be reviewed. And not only IT, but also digital tools are going to be the ones that we can rely on for that purpose. For example, during the pandemic, our way of life and the work style was subject to change. And the whole industrial style was exposed to change. And if I come back into the original point, about 10 years ago, 20 years ago, that instead of just pursuing to become another Tokyo, that the uniqueness of the island should be emphasized. And I think that kind of viewpoint is going to be further emphasized going forward. Another point I would like to mention here is that the geographical situation that surrounds the island. To put it simply, Okinawa is the westernmost region or the remote place. But viewed from the Asian perspective, it has been pointed out, it is located at a very important, significant place. It is called a gravity model using the economic terms. Gravity, it means the earth and power and to pull everything. So the flow of economic activities are going to be in proportion with the mass and the distance. It is a Newtonian principle as well. For example, the trade between Japan and Korea is bigger than that of Japan and Germany. That is because of the geographical distance. But at the same time, the U.S.-Japan trade volume is larger than that of the Japan and Korea. That is because of the mass or the economic scale. So what I would like to mention here is that about 30 years ago, the Tokyo gravity was the strongest 30 years ago when it comes to Okinawa. Taiwan and Southeast Asia were closer to Okinawa, but their economic might was not that strong enough. But in 10, 20 years in time, the Asian economies grew and the gravity accordingly grew as well. So from the viewpoint of the Asian perspective, Asian gravity, how is it going to be made use of for the development of Okinawa? Similar to that of a gravity from Tokyo. At least I could say that. 50 years ago, there was the reversion of Okinawa, and about 58 years ago, the Singapore got independent from Malaysia. And I went to the historical museum on that occasion. What was quite impressive for me was that the Lee Kuan Yew, in tears, was talking about it went independent despite a lack of resources, natural resources. And it is quite unbelievable that the Lee Kuan Yew was speaking in tears, despite the affluence it has gained. So within the limited hub, how it is going to fare is going to be important. This is something I would like to pick up through the discussion. One of the important points I would like to share is that tourism is growing in the world economy. With the more gravity that the people from Okinawa, that once the economic growth was achieved, is achieved by some countries, and that those countries will attract more tourists. Going forward, that there is still a growing need for tourism in the Asian region. with the end of the pandemic, it is going to further grow. What we have to reflect upon in terms of tourism is that it is not just a short-term, short visit and such as buying souvenirs. It is not like it, as a matter of fact. There are going to be different human level interactions, and that will have an important impact on society. So in light of the existing infrastructure, how we are going to attract more tourists, but at the same time, how overseas the investment is going to be encouraged in the travel sector, that is going to be important. That means one important example from the viewpoint of gravity is that there are going to be more mobility. How we are going to make full use of that phenomena in order to expand the industry base in Okinawa. Singapore has grown so much, and that because of partly because of the MICE. That instead of the conventional tourism, but they were intent on creating a new model. I hope that we'll be able to come back to this point with more discussions. What I would like to summarize here is that Japan itself is a Tokyo-centered economic development, but Okinawa is trying to depart from that kind of approach. I think digitalization will be a helping hand. And where the gravity exists from the viewpoint of Okinawa, there is supposed to be a security threat involved, but at the same time, economically, that provides a lot of opportunity. Today, now, there is a delicate issue between Taiwan and China, but China is closely linked economically with Taiwan. That is another fact. Therefore, we have to closely monitor how gravity works. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
So where's the gravity? That was the focus of your comment. We hope that we'll be able to delve further later on. Next, we'd like to turn to Ms. Fuchibe. Ms. Fuchibe, please. Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Fuchibe. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm very grateful. Well, Dr. Ito talked about a topic, and I will be followed by former Governor Inamine. So I'm at a loss as to what I can talk about, being sandwiched between two eminent persons. But allow me to speak in my capacity. I would appreciate your kind understanding. So let me look back a little bit. Shall I turn to the next slide? The title is Okinawa Promotion from 51 years onwards. Seeking to be a very gentle island, which is the treasure of Japan and treasure of the world. That is what we hope for Okinawa. So let me look back. This is the second promotion plan. 13 trillion yen was promoted, and infrastructure has developed as a result of this priority plan. But the infrastructure has developed, and the economy has grown. That is true. And as you see in this graph, the transport industry has really developed as a result of these investment. Now, Okinawans are familiar with this chart, I'm sure. After they returned to Japan, the transport industry has grown remarkably. Inbound tourists has increased by 18-fold, and transport revenue, or tourism revenue, has increased by 22-fold. But on the other hand, as was mentioned in the opening remarks, there are many issues behind this development. What are some of the challenges? The income gap, income disparity is very large, and also the poverty involving children. And the third issue is low productivity. Let me turn to the next graph. This talks about the distribution of income disparity. After the return to Japan, it was 57.8, but then since then, it did increase. It hovered in the 70% range. And this situation has continued up until now. But quite interesting, though. This is in line with the Japanese growth trend. So therefore, if you want to alleviate income disparity, it's important that Okinawa grow beyond the average national growth. One other point which I wish to point out. Yes, we have tourism industry has grown remarkably. Based on the recent survey, it has become clear that we asked whether or not there is an income disparity for Okinawa. 53% said yes, there is income disparity, but then 47% said that there is no income disparity. That was the result of the recent survey of Okinawans. So therefore, maybe there's a gap between how the mainland Japanese see the situation. Now, what are some of the reasons? There are many reasons for this gap in perception. I'm part of the tourism industry myself. I have to reflect on this as a member of the tourism industry. I think we were involved in very casual business. We simply were involved in selling goods. We're not manufacturing goods. We're simply procuring goods and selling them. That is why the yield is very low, and we're not able to build brand value because we did not produce things on our own. So therefore, the so-called trader economy, which is a phrase which is frequently used, it's about the circulation of the regional economy. The circulation rate is the worst. It's the fourth worst in Japan. 21%. It's 21% of the value flows to outside prefecture. How can we make sure that the value stays and circulates within the Okinawa Prefecture? That is one point. And also, as a result of COVID-19, we have come to recognize this particular issue. Tourism industry has been hard hit by COVID-19. We are overly skewed toward the tourism industry. The tertiary industry accounts for 80% of the economy in Okinawa. So we need to make sure that we have more broad spectrum of industries in Okinawa. I think that's a reflection on our part. Then having said that, how can we promote Okinawa going forward? Let's turn to the next slide. In doing so, we need to consider the benefit, the advantages, and the uniqueness of Okinawa. We need to leverage that. And I have listed up some of those advantages here. I believe this is self-explanatory. After you're aware of the advantages and the uniqueness of Okinawa, yes, the natural environment, the geopolitical advantage, and also we are part of the National Strategic Special Plan. We also have the OIST, Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology Graduate University. We also have the highest birth rate in Japan. We also have the history of overseas exchange involving Ryukyu Kingdom, and also we have the activities of Sanjurokuse Kume. From the early 90s, we were able to have Chinese personnel coming into Okinawa, and they contributed to the growth of Okinawa economy. And Governor Nakaima, I understand, is part of this trend. Maybe Mr. Inamine, maybe your ancestors also came from China. So we have the worldwide Uchinachu network. We have 420,000 network involving Okinawans outside Japan and in the world. So we have these advantages and uniqueness of the Okinawans. And let me turn to the next slide. It's important that we make use of the global trend. Yes, there is a major global trend taking place. For example, we see very rapid technical innovation, and also we have changes as a result of COVID-19, promotion of DX, and also Society 5.0 and SDGs. And also a national security issue. Yes, the wavering of national security, which became clear as a result of the Russian aggression into Ukraine, and also WHIP, free and open in the Pacific. How can Okinawa promote its economy against this backdrop? This is the challenge here. So let me turn to the next slide here. In the interest of time, I'll be very quick here. Tourism industry. This will be the basic. That is without a doubt. But then it's not just a tourism industry. There are a lot of words you see on this chart. For example, WHIP, Human Resource Development, exchange with Taiwan, and also MRO, biometrics, mobility. Many of these issues are all part of the potential industry. These are all potential industries. It's important that they be connected with the tourism industry. These also have synergy with the tourism industry. We want to be the happiest island. We also have aerospace industry listed here. We're not talking about 5 years or 10 years. So we're talking about 30 years' time. In 30 years' time, all these industries could be potential growth industry. Let me turn to the next slide. What I want to talk about is how we can create and build new industries. We have the so-called Okinawa-style innovation ecosystem, which I wish to promote here. As I mentioned earlier, OIST is a very unique organization, which is the Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology Graduate. We have a lot of papers being published by OIST. So the research results need to be connected to business results and business innovation. Up until now, we work for focusing on the industries here in the prefecture, but we should focus not just on the prefecture. As I mentioned earlier, we need to focus on overseas. We need to invite people from the overseas. That perspective is required. So overseas and, of course, outside the prefecture. So human resources, investment, and companies need to be incorporated from outside the prefecture and create new startups, new industries. And then it's important that Okinawa maintain loyalty and sending them the results outside the prefecture. What is important here is that intellectual property be retained by Okinawa. This is important. This applies to business. In the case of franchisee, we should not be a franchisee. We should be a franchisor. The origin should be in Okinawa. We should be the franchisor and then send them outside the prefecture. That perspective is required. And also in the case of OISD, we're focused on basic research, but I think applied research needs to be carried out in the Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology Graduate University. What makes this possible is the National Strategic Special Zone. That framework is there, which is very important. So by working on these initiatives, it's important that we create and build new industries here in Okinawa. If I may say the following. I talked what Governor Inamine mentioned in the discussion has maintained. He mentioned that Okinawans lack the ability to see the future. So how do we see the future? That is important. We're not talking 5 or 10 years. So we should look beyond that. We should talk Okinawa promotion over the long term. And last but not least, let me talk about the following. What should we aspire to achieve? Let's turn to this next slide. So we should no longer be the frontier for Japan. We should become the center of Asia from being the frontier of Japan. We should be the bridge we should be a bridge with the world. So how to become the bridge connecting the island nations belt? There are 3 major methods. We need a framework to concentrate human resource development. So human resource development should be done in conjunction with this. And also OISD, we need to utilize OISD and create a new business model based on OISD. And the third element, I talked about this in the context of freedom, free and open in the Pacific. And the basis of FOIP should be based in Okinawa, I believe. So free and open in the Pacific. That basis should be in Okinawa. It shouldn't just be national defense, but security, medical services economy is part of the national security. So that base, including economy, medical, should be based in Okinawa. This should translate into tourism industry as well. By doing so, we'll be able to improve the quality of the tourism industry, and we can also add new brand value to Okinawa tourism industry. I do hope that we'll be able to turn our eyes to the overseas, create a base with a vision to the overseas. This should serve to promote Okinawa economy going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I believe what you have said is very close to what we call hub. So later on, I hope that we can have further in-depth debate. So may I turn to Mr. Inamine? Yes. First of all, that we have had this conference in Okinawa, I would like to express my appreciation to Yomiuri Shimbun. Dr. Itoh has mentioned from comprehensive point of view, and Ms. Fuchibe has mentioned about what is happening today as a representative of the Okinawa Association of Corporate Executives, and she mentioned some of the detail. I would try not to be overlapping and repetitive. So I will just focus on this slide, this one slide. Now, from what position has Okinawa started and how it has evolved? Primary industry, it was almost on par with mainland, and it is true today. But the primary industry percentage has declined significantly, and the secondary industry, Okinawa has seen growth, but mainland has grown. And the tertiary industry, Okinawa has a greater percentage over nationwide figure. For secondary the industry, it used to be 10% in Okinawa. It has grown to close to 30%. And on nationwide, it was more than 30%, but it is now more than 40%. In Okinawa, it is only 4.3%, but for nationwide, it is 20%. At the time of return, both the conservative and the progressive, including the Yara administration, as Okinawa was returned to introduce foreign capital and try to reinforce the secondary industry. But the government of Japan has put a hold and check on this. because what has been decided by the prefecture was not to be adopted as is, and many manufacturing industries have withdrawn from Okinawa, as was mentioned earlier by Dr. Ito. On nationwide basis, the economic growth was very steadfast. From such success experience, domestic industry need to be protected and try to further grow and expand. That has led to growth of the Japanese economy. Now, on the other hand, for Okinawa manufacturing industry, Prime Minister Sato has come to the fore and tried to introduce and invite shipyards to Okinawa. So many Japanese businesses have planned to invest into Okinawa, but they have disappeared. And Panasonic, the Matsushita Electric at the time, that has remained. But at last, the land had been given over to the Okinawa government, and now you have a hospital being built on that land. Why had the manufacturing industries withdrawn from Okinawa? Many reasons have been cited. There are many typhoons, a lot of wet land, and that labor unions are too strong. But the biggest problem, I believe, was that manufacturing industry have to have many supporting and related industries also to be invited. But in Okinawa, we didn't have that many supporting industries to start with. So to invite investment by the major businesses, it was almost nil at the very initial stage. And the government have made a thorough search and try to make a lot of investments into infrastructure, be it airports or be it the harbors and ports and roads. What was most impressive is, many of you may have forgotten, but dams. Okinawa used to be like villages where you have houses with water tanks on top of the roof, because if there is a drought, no water supply was available for a long period of time. But with dams that are being built all at once, for Okinawa, with the less number of typhoons, you do not have a suspension of water supply that often. Now, I only have 3 minutes to go. I have to rush. So the government is trying to promote and develop Okinawa. And the plan, the name has been changed. When I was a governor, we dropped development because we wanted fishing rod rather than the fish itself. We wanted to think for ourselves, be it tourism or be it ICT. We had special systems being created. And that, I believe, has led to boosting of tourism as well as ICT industries. And now under the Governor Nakayama, the formulation of the policy was moved to the prefectural government. More than 300 billion yen of block grants were given, but then ever since then it has been gradually reduced. Now, if I try to explain about how we have gone through the consultation, the time will be too short. I only have 2 minutes. So what I would like to think about, what would be the keys and hints in promoting Okinawa? We need to draw on our strength rather than rectifying our weak points and drawbacks, as Ms. Fuchibe has been mentioning. Geographical advantage. We are the cornerstone of the Pacific, not only militarily, but academically and culturally and economically. We had to have a hub airport. ANA used to have a hub airport in Okinawa. So Okinawa was quite active. But because of pandemic, it has gone down. For tourism, the cruise boats, the number of cruise boats calling on the ports, Okinawa was the top prefecture in Japan. Naha port It is not the largest or the busiest in Japan, but if you look at the prefecture, it is very big. But it should not depend only on tourism. Of course, tourism will continue to be important, but at the time of 9/11, there was season tourism. That's to say, we have school trips in the spring, and in the summertime there will be vacations for a resort, and autumn also school trips. But then, because of 9/11, the school trips have come to nil. I'm sorry, I'm running out of time. I'm already 88 years old, so I cannot speak in a very fast speed anymore. Sorry for that. So, about school trips, it is zero. And nobody is coming to Okinawa anymore. So tourism should be in the main industry, but we should also try to grow the other industries as well. And anything to do with the national interest matters greatly. These are remote islands. They don't have economy. If we do nothing, it will be zero. It will be like Senkaku Islands. And at the time of the peak, 282 people were living on the island. If they continue to live on the island, there would have been no security issue or incidents anymore. But if they have become unmanned island, we could have a remote education. We could have ICT to be utilized by connecting those remote economies with the ICT. That would be conducive to the boosting of the whole Okinawa economy. And what Mr. Ishimine, who is the top of the Okinawa, the Business Associations and Federations Conference, the very low gross prefectural income, this is the dark side, that we should not try to automate because that would and further enlarge this dark issue. We should try to boost the employment. A higher value added is the way to go. For example, like OIST, as Ms. Fuchibe has been mentioning, highly advanced science and technology, the research papers are being produced. And that should lead to commercializations, connecting with the business. Sorry, by extending by 30 seconds.
So let's continue the discussion later on. 50 years after the return of Okinawan economy, for example, as Fuchibe-san explained, I think there was a rapid growth, but it hit the ceiling, and the income gap still remains with mainland. And Okinawa economy is now growing, as Inamine-san mentioned. It was hard hit by the pandemic. And the pandemic impact was so enormous, so far as the economy is dependent on tourism. I think that was quite evident in the Okinawan case. And with that in mind, Dr. Itoh, you were talking about the gravity story. I think the situation remains tough when it comes to Okinawan economy. The infected cases, the number is increasing in Japan. It is closer to Southeast Asia and Taiwan, but in light of the very tough situation, how the gravity is going to be further used, I think it was touched upon in the first session. In the time of crisis, that also offers us an opportunity. For example, the pandemic is a big problem, and that causes us inconvenience. But there are things that we learned a lot from this experience as well. I was also involved in the discussion with regard to the tourism expansion of Kansai region. There are a lot of things we can learn from the pandemic. There are those tourists from Korea as well as China just for shopping, but they are not spending too much. And we have seen an increase in the number of inbound travelers, but does not make any positive impact on the economy. But the historical aspects and the cultural assets, how they are going to make made full use of, that is an important aspect. Therefore, we are going to accelerate on the promote of the tourism. There should be ways to promote them. I think compared to other regions, in the case of Okinawa, the number of inbound travelers increased so rapidly before the pandemic. But now we are witnessing the impact of the pandemic. How we are going to fine-tune it? We don't have to fundamentally change it because that is the strength of Okinawa. Okinawa's assets and resources, how they are going to be fully utilized from the viewpoint of the future forward-looking strategy. Fuchibe-san. There are lots of strength of Okinawa, so to speak. And as Dr. Itoh explained, for example, the DX, digital revolution, it is going to be a thing that the whole nation will be able to leverage on, triggered by the pandemic. And Okinawa, for its part, will be able to grow as the digital island. How big is that opportunity? And I think it is a matter of intention of the Okinawans. It is not whether it is going to be given an opportunity or not. The Okinawan economy was hard hit by the pandemic, and it is a remote island, so it was further impacted. Therefore, in light of this kind of situation, how the digital economy is going to be promoted, it is going to be the opportunity given to us, but we have to seize on that opportunity. What about the appetite for growing the digital economy in the island within the Okinawa business community? I do believe there is such appetite. Inamine-san. I think even before the return of Okinawa, there were different kinds of discussions, and now we have reached this stage. During the gubernatorial days, the term development was removed from the economic development program, and you requested giving us a fishing net instead of fish itself. So my question is about the following thing: the relationship between Tokyo and Okinawa. Not only Okinawa, I think there is the Okinawa Development Program, and there used to be the agency dedicated to the development of the island economy. How do you see the negotiation with the central government should develop? For the past 30 years, to a certain extent, and that assimilation and toward the mainland was the objective of our pursuit. But as has been mentioned already, when it comes to income per capita, there is no major difference. That means we are we are still in the 47th in ranking. We try to catch up, but we still remains in the 47th in ranks. If there is going to be an opportunity, we have to go ahead. That means we need the fishing rod instead of fish. Well, it is easier to get fish, but if it is going to be a fishing rod, how you are going to select the rod and how we are going to be trained in the fishing, I think that means our own efforts that are going to be involved. So it is a difficult task, but unless we are going to embark on that, we will not be able to raise the ranking anymore. What I still remember is Mr. Yamanaka, a politician, said that you are the first one who mentioned that, and he gave us a helping hand. But unfortunately, the institution should be changed, and that means the fishing rod should be supplied. I think there was a lot of opposition within the Japanese government. But in addition to that, when it comes to the Diet members, they were elected in different constituencies. So they start complaining about the special treatment to the Okinawa. Therefore, I think that those DOT members are going to be put in a very delicate situation. As a result, we were not able to get good quality fishing rods, but with some fishing rods, we were successful in developing the information-related industry, and that was not a bad thing.
Well, when you negotiate with the Japanese government on behalf of Okinawa government, I suppose there is a long-standing challenge on your part. This relates to what we discussed back in session 1, but in Okinawa, you have concentration of U.S. forces, and that's why you receive subsidies because of the bases in Okinawa. Not just subsidies, by the way. In order to facilitate understanding of the part of the community, you have received promotion. So therefore, basis and promotion budget were linked in the past. Of course, there was a discussion as to whether or not these two are actually linked. Now, on this point, going forward, how do you see the situation going forward? To be very blunt, yes, it is linked. The two are linked. But I could not say it's linked because this involves Mr. Hashimoto. Mr. Hashimoto said that if you say that there's a link, this will make me sad. That's what Mr. Hashimoto mentioned. So therefore, Okinawa side is placed in a very difficult situation. For example, there's a talk about promotion of the northern area. Northern region was behind the central region of Okinawa. So that is why budget for promotion would be assigned to the northern area. But then for regions that are, yes, there's a link of the budget with areas that are linked with the Henoko region. So it's a very difficult situation. We have the Okinawa Policy Council, so Chief Cabinet Secretary, and all the ministers are involved. It's a wonderful organization involving all the ministers, and this was set up under Governor Ota from 1996 to 1997. For Okinawa economy, we were in a very rosy situation. It's not positive. We were able to see a very rosy picture. We saw a dream. Mr. Makin, who is the vice governor, has written about this in a book. Yes, that was a very rosy situation. Why was that the case? The Policy Council took up the vision of making Okinawa an internationally attractive city. So, for example, when the very next day after I became the governor, the Policy Research Council was established, and also various prices were brought down, and information-related industries and tourism industry-related backup would be provided. This was immediately the day after I became the governor. But unfortunately, currently there is no such Policy Research Council being held. It's very unfortunate. So I sincerely hope that Okinawa itself will consider this matter. If we seek the best in terms of the discussion with the national government, it would be very difficult. I think both sides need to make concession. We should not be fixated. We should not be fixated on our respective position. The national government should discuss with the Okinawa government. I say this because if you have discussions, you're able to plant seeds. Flowers will not blossom unless you plant the seeds beforehand. There are no seeds being planted right now. So what happens 10 years from now, 20 years from now? There will be no flowers in 10 years' time, 20 years' time. That's the most painful part. The second runway was created in Naha Airport. This was taken up in 1999 in the Policy Research Council in April. And at last, we have this. It's a time-consuming process, you see. So I would like to urge the following. Both sides, hopefully, will hold the Policy Research Council meeting, and I hope that the relationship that can be established between the prefecture and the national government. I see. Dr. Itoh, you were the former chairperson of the Okinawa Development Council. Tokyo and Okinawa Prefecture at this moment doesn't seem to have much discussion. There is no forum for discussion between Tokyo and Naha. You have no forum to have candid discussions between the two. That was the comment just made. How should the government respond to the situation, in your opinion? Well, I have no understanding of the political backdrop. So I'm sure Mr. Ota and Mr. Inamine have a different view on the situation. But having said this, various budget allocation has been provided to Okinawa in the past. that was a special treatment. But it's not just about Okinawa, is it? For example, for the past 10 years, I was involved in the rebuilding council, especially in relation to Fukushima Prefecture, Iwate Prefecture, and Miyagi Prefecture as well. These are all special circumstances. We need special frameworks for those three regions. And also, going back to what was mentioned earlier, Hokkaido, the past probably had the same issue. Unless we did that, what would have happened? Even without these budgetary allocations, taxes will be collected by the national government, and they'll be distributed among different prefectures. When you distribute to different regions, you have to be fair and equal. You have to consider civil minimum, you have to consider the population in distributing the budget. That is, of course, that in itself is important. But then we cannot create new regional development in the true sense based on such budgetary allocations. So the issue of base and the promotion budget for Okinawa should not be linked 100%. There is no need to link. They should be treated separately. But having said that, to promote economic promotion in Okinawa as a model case, we hope that Okinawa could be successful, and that is why budgetary allocation should be provided. Now, going back to what Governor Inamine mentioned, who should be coming up with these ideas? The ideas should be generated in the local community. They should receive not just fish. They want fishing rods. They should consider how they can fish based on the fishing rods. Unless that is the case, things will not be successful. If I could share a different perspective, you talk about digital transformation. Let me talk about the DX. When it comes to digital technology, like the internet and IoT, it's not just about creating information hub. It's not just about creating call center investment. That's not what this is all about. What is important is that with digitalization, anybody will be able to use systems outside the prefecture. DX can change the business model. They can transform the business model. This is my experience based in Tohoku. In a place called Rikuzen Takada, they were wiped away by the tsunami, and the shoyu shop was collapsed. How could we rebuild the local industry? What did they do? They lost plants and manufacturing plants. And also, they were providing soy sauce in bulk, but they lost their customers. So what should they do against this backdrop? At the end of the day, they found that digital saved them. So cloud financing supported them. So they were able to receive national financing. So these people are interested in these soy sauce products. They were interested in small lots. They were interested in word of mouth. So in the past, their business was based on bulk purchase, but these are very high quality soy sauce products. So even in small lots, they can be sold to a very large number of customers. And this became very successful. It's a shop called Yagisawa Shoten. I hope you look it up in the net. So through digital, everything could be resolved. Why were they able to successfully rebuild this? They have assets that were not wiped away by the tsunami. So enzymes and materials that create quality soy sauce. So when it comes to Okinawa, when they think about digital, they might think that they have to do something leading edge. But then Okinawa traditional goods, they can actually combine that with DX. How could they leverage Okinawa traditional uniqueness with digital technology? It's all about fishing rods. It's about fishing on your own. Fishing rods. Actually, fishing rods provided by the government is inferior to the fishing rods that could be provided by digital economy. So this probably relates to digital city planning. Thank you. Fuchibe-san. Translating crisis into opportunity. This was the lesson learned from March 11th earthquake. In the case of Okinawa, can the same thing be done in the face of COVID-19? Do you believe that they can translate crisis into opportunity? Can you think of good ideas to do this? What about your advice from the business community? Ms. Fuchibe, please. Yes, thank you very much. As a result of COVID-19, transport industry has lost 80% of the revenue and profit. And they're still not yet fully recovered. But going forward, I'm sure that they will be on their way to recovery. But when it comes to disasters, these unexpected crises, they come from time to time. They occur from time to time. So therefore, we should be prepared for the next crisis. At Keisei Doyukai, we are introducing one of the initiatives, which is to learning succeeding lessons from COVID-19 and coming up with a response for the future. Oh, please continue. So that's what we want to do. We're trying to compile that, and we want to provide the recommendation to the prefecture. Also, in conjunction, in terms of the tourism industry, I mentioned the tertiary industry accounts for 80% of the economy. If you're overly independent on tertiary industry, the damage could be quite overwhelming. So we need to develop other industries. Tourism industry, we can create research after the crisis. We can translate that into a good outcome. I think we're at that juncture now. So research should be done in nuclear ways of collaboration. Unless we have good collaboration, everything could be lost all at once. So I think that's one of the lessons we learned in the face of COVID-19, and that's a reflection we need to make on our part. Going back to what Dr. Ito mentioned earlier, digital transformation and DX. DX is the base for all the industries, I believe. So DX should not be on a standalone basis. Digital transformation should be at the base of all industries, because digital transformation, DX, is at the base of all the industries. This applies to SDGs as well. So I think we need to consider development based on the DX. We should consider the promotion of the industry based on DX. So Okinawa, there's a shortfall of DX-related personnel in Okinawa. We need human resource development in Okinawa from that perspective as well.
Yes, Mr. Inamine, do you have anything to supplement? I do understand that you have some additional comments that you would like to make. Yes? Thank you. It is not directly linked to economy, but if you could zoom in on the assessment of the reversion. Do you have the handout material? I believe you do have this. The chart 4. No, this is it. I think this is it. I'm sure you can understand when you see this chart. This overlaps with what I have discussed before. There are negative sentiment overwhelmingly at the initial phase after the reversion, and that was a peak under Governor Ota, and also the same under Governor Nakaima. This is a data taken from NHK, the public television. But then Kyodo News has taken statistics. It is 94% who think positively about reversion, because 50 years, that has been very long and very important. Economically speaking, because of the pandemic, there are problems and there are damages. But for the people of Okinawa, they think that it is so good for them right now. But the government should not be too complacent. That is because actually there are opposition voice, that there is inequality. This is to do with what I have said before. 83% of the respondents say that there is inequality, and more than 60% says that it is quite unfair. But even so, on the whole, people think very positively. This is a majority, that the reversion for them was good. But this is highly complex and complicated. As Dr. Ito has been suggesting, there could be generational differences. 5 decades is quite long. So there has been evolution and changes happening. But having said so it is so good. In order for the people to genuinely feel so, we need to do more. We need to sort out the issue of the military bases, and the economy that must be recovered fully and firmly. When and if the pandemic subsides, we should advance forward always. So from now onwards, the Okinawa people should rise up, and we should stand firmly on our own feet. And that, I believe, is what we need to do, and ask the national government as well. From the floor, there are questions being asked. Many questions have been already received from the floor. Now we would like to move on to question and answers with the audience. What Mr. Inamine has mentioned, there seems to be some generational gap as to how they feel. What I would like to ask you is the identity of Okinawa. So identity of Okinawa people, the Okinawans, as well as Ryukyu people and the Japanese mainlanders. As for the direction and orientation of the politics for the younger people, should we align with the younger people or should we celebrate diversity in views? That we should try to respect the different and diverse views. There would be many important elections coming on in Okinawa for the younger generation who aspire to be politicians, perhaps, if you have any good advice. The issue of identity is quite difficult and complex. So thank you for this difficult question. I would like to look back into our 50 years history. 50 years ago, I was asked by many people a same question. Mr. Inamine, well, the Okinawans, they call themselves Uchinanchu, and they call us Yamatonchu, the mainlanders. For the Okinawans or locals, what is the relevance and meaning of that? That was the question. I thought about this, and I have given the answer, and I was a bit concerned. So I have asked many different people, like Mr. Oshiro Tatsuhiro, who won the prize for Akutagawa Prize, for the novels. Uchinanchu, the concept is Okinawans divided by two. Okinawans are Okinawans, but they used to be Ryukyu people. There was Ryukyu kingdom in the olden times. And the good example is, as is often talked about, what the Governor Izume has said, and the word persists. We wanted to be Yamatonchu, the mainlander, but we aspired, but we were never able to make it. So there are some delicate and sensitive nuances to this concept. When I ask different people today, their way of thinking is very different. The younger generation, younger people today, when they were born, the military bases were there. And if you walked the Kokusaidori street, you were able to see readily and distinguish the mainland school children coming. But right now, their appearance are exactly the same with the local Okinawans. So when we were not really aware, Okinawa were getting much closer to the mainland in Japan. But should it be let alone? We are on a remote island. There are many negative aspects. So we should try to minimize these negative aspects. And we need to have our originality, our advantage to be further utilized and strengthened. So the Uchinanchu, the local Okinawan style, should also be preserved. You mentioned about election. Yes, this is a difficult issue. How the Okinawa people will decide. But there are different issues. For example, as was mentioned earlier, the identity has evolved and changed, and many other things have also changed, putting aside the economy. Yara-san, Taira-san, Nishime-san, Nishime-san, 3 terms, and then Ota-san, Ota-san, then Inamine, Inamine. But there are swing votes. For example, it continued until Governor Nakaima's times. But the pattern seems to be changing. So what is the pattern right now? Ona-san, the conservative, is at the center, and the whole of Okinawa team is being created. And that has led to the present political regime. So for the Okinawa people, we have highly complicated emotive sentiments. So with LDP and Komeito Party coming closely together, I don't think that would persist or continue. Okinawa identity is slightly changing, but still, what remains will still continue to remain, I believe.
This year is going to be an election year, economic and development for one thing, and the military issue and the base issue, they are going to be taken up in the political season. I have another question for Fuchibe-san. During the Ryukyu Kingdom, there was the interactions with the international community, and that was one of the strengths of Okinawa boasts of. Going forward, are there any elements and that Okinawa can make use of? The relationship with the rest of the world? I think as Okinawans recognize well, as far as this is concerned, during the Japan's isolation period, there was the kingdom which was engaged in international trade. There were a lot of visitors from the rest of the world. The Tokume Masamine, who was a medical doctor, who was engaged in anesthesia. And so Tokume-san was the very first medical doctor who did that. And some of the school textbooks, Rikugu Engi, was brought in by the Okinawan, and it was exported into Japan to be used as a school textbooks. Therefore, there was a unique culture, and there was a unique the kingdom, and we cultivated interactions with the rest of the world. The Kume family, 36 the Kume families. That does not automatically mean that there are 36 Kumens, but instead they came over to Okinawa and to bring in different technologies, and that made a great contribution to the development of Okinawan economy. I think we have to reflect upon this rich history so that we can be more proactive in deepening international interactions. Omine Jisue-san, who is pottery artist, in the past that during the kingdom period, the Okinawans were more aggressive and energetic, but these days, Okinawa Uchinanchu were more introverts. But instead of that kind of approach, we have to go abroad and absorb more things more from the rest of the world. I think we have to stand on our own feet going forward. As a citizen of Okinawa, some people believe that there are a lot of attractions. And I think this is a question for Dr. Itoh. The things that need to be materialized in terms of the policy issues, what is supposed to be the priority issue? With regard to the current development plan, I was not directly involved, but from a long period of time, there are a lot of potentialities that Okinawa can make use of. That means the synergetic effects which should be considered, that should be prioritized. I think forward linkage is the term, or backward linkage the economist usually uses. And with that kind of a linkage, it is going to be a stepping stone for the future growth. For example, there should be things that should be manufactured backward in the backyard, for example, for the automobile industry. Maybe the aerospace supporting industry, for one thing. Digital network in this area, some important element industries can be brought in. And I think personnel and human resources development is extremely important in that regard. That means the linkage industries or elements should be fully utilized. And that would bring us more growth. May I? This is an additional comment that making use of overseas intelligence and OIST is one thing. And when it comes to this Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology graduate school, we have a lot of foreign students studying. And if they are going to start a business in Okinawa, there are supposed to be some obstacles that they are going to face. They have been solved, but in the beginning, it was difficult for them to open a bank account. And today, that if they are going to start their own business, 5 million yen and should be spared for the capital. But for those from the rest of the world, it is difficult for them to put in place 5 million yen. And still, there's going to be a check 1 year after whether that 5 million yen still remains. And from that perspective, it is going to be a big obstacle for them to initiate their business. We have the National Strategy Special Zone system here in Okinawa. It has to be fully utilized, and so that we are going to put in place an environment which is conducive to initiating new businesses. May I? I think that is a very important aspect. I neglected to mention the following thing. A quick solution is going to be an investment from overseas. This is quite important. Today, at the government panel, we have been discussing this for the past 10 years. We still have a way to go. But what is interesting in this regard is that some of the proposals, Fukuoka, the mayor of Fukuoka and the governor of Hokkaido, some of the regions are trying and to make full use of this kind of initiative. Needless to say, there are some regulations and that will block the progress. But if there are going to be some key zones and areas, there should be a lot of things that they will make use of. I think it is important for Okinawa to think in this way. It doesn't have to be from overseas, but from the mainland as well. So that means the economic community and prefectural government, as well as the national central government in light of the National Strategic Special Zone. So there needs to be some coordination between the stakeholders. That needs some detailed discussion. I wonder if this kind of a discussion is missing. What do you think? Fuchibe-san, sorry about this frank comment, but I hope the prefectural government will be more proactive in this area. How the Okinawan economy is going to further enhanced, instead of just catching up. Rather, we have the 6th development and program and plan, which has been initiated. The grants, different kinds of grants and the tax preferential treatments, we cannot rely fully on them all the time. So what is most essential, that needs to be discussed.
I see. Well, Governor Inamine, you talked about the Okinawa Promotion Council under the Governor Itoh. I understand that the Policy Council is no longer being held, so it's a form that involves the Prefectural Governor of Okinawa and the Chief Cabinet Secretary. You have had very long-standing discussions in the past, but that is no longer the case. I believe that such a council should be held. I agree. But is it very difficult to host such a council now? Yes, it can be very challenging, I'm afraid. I say this because, how can I put it? The Okinawa side, considering the position of the governor is very difficult and very challenging. And for the national government, again, they're being very rigid. So I think both sides need to practice greater flexibility. That, I believe, is the situation. And also, if I may add, I talked about this earlier, and it's about a different topic, by the way. But the Chairman Ishimine talked about the negative aspect. What are some of the negative aspects? At the end of the day, it's all about Okinawa. 99% of Okinawa is all about SMEs. SMEs are not able to reap large profit. Very difficult. Not impossible, but very difficult to generate a lot of profit. And also, conversely, if companies are not profitable, they're not able to pay large wages. So I think the issue going forward is how we can bring large companies to Okinawa. But that's impossible to bring large companies to Okinawa. Because when Okinawa was returned to national government, the government tried to bring large companies to Okinawa, but they could not do that. So what happens as a result? Companies with high added value need to be created in Okinawa itself. For example, when it comes to tourism, we need to improve the quality of the tourism industry. If we can improve the quality of the industry, then we can expand the pie. So going back to what was mentioned earlier, for example, I think for 8 years in a row, Okinawa. Can you repeat what you mentioned, sir? Yes, sorry. So sorry. Please ignore that. Please ignore this part. He was talking about my hotel. He was talking about my hotel being ranked very high for 8 years in a row. That's what he was talking about. So you have these wonderful hotels. You have wonderful assets. If you can bring in high quality assets, then you can improve the pie. You can improve the value. So as I mentioned earlier, so OIST, Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology Graduate University, is ranked number 9 in terms of the papers being published. Yes, it's OIST is the Science Technology Graduate University, isn't it? So you have such high-level research facilities. So the quality of research is very high in Okinawa. It's important that they can be translated into business. Then we can create added value as a result of the high-quality research. So we shouldn't just involve OIST. We should create other research facilities surrounding OIST. And it's important that we create a cluster of companies, for example, in the bioindustry. And also furthermore, it's important that we expand such clusters of industries in Okinawa. And also, I think ICTs, we see a clustering of ICT industry. So inclusive of remote islands, I think we need to create clusters. And we should improve the quality. And so Li Tenghui of Taiwan, he made a surprising comment earlier. He made a lecture in Ishigaki-jima. I went to his and attended his lecture. What did Li Tenghui mention? In the past, Taiwanese visited Ishigaki-jima, and they produced sugar canes. They created primary industry and secondary industry based on sugar canes. Now, Okinawa has clusters in Taiwan. Now, in Taiwan, they also have a lot of manufacturing facilities. Taiwan is referred to as the world's factory. So if we can link with Taiwan, then if we can link the hardware and the non-physical side of Taiwan and Okinawa, since we're neighbors, we can actually enhance our link. That was the gist of the lecture mentioned by Li Tenghui. He talked about how using ICT to spur economic development of Taiwan and Okinawa. He was already past the age of 90 at that time. I was really surprised by his message about ICT clustering. So it's important that in that manner we create new forms of clustering. It's important that we create the links of industries, not on a standalone basis, but it's important that we cluster and link these different industries. That's what we should aspire to achieve. That is my wish. I see. Thank you very much. Well, there's so much that we can talk about. As for myself, it was 20 years ago that I was based in Okinawa. Mr. Inamine talked about the link between the people. I think this applies to any given age, isn't it? So if that's the case, well, 20 years ago, the government, the politicians, they had a lot of passion about Okinawa back then. And the politicians had a lot of political links with people in Okinawa. They were not just politically motivated, but the political side had passion and had a lot of compassion about Okinawa in the past. But if you look back today, do we have such politicians? The politicians, I think we have different generations of politicians now. Do they have such passion for Okinawa? Do you have politicians based in Okinawa in Tokyo with that much passion about Okinawa? But then times can change. So the recognition, the awareness of the people in Okinawa may change. And also on the Tokyo side, for better or worse, they can become more maybe business-like. I think Government under Mr. Kishida is coming with a new digital plan. And so we talked about how this is an election year. Yes, we have a very important gubernatorial election coming up in Okinawa in fall. And also we have the upper house election coming up in summer. After the upper house election in summer, Tokyo will no longer have the political season and the situation should stabilize. So maybe after that point we can talk about promotion of Okinawa in full-fledged manner. That opportunity should be available. That is my thought. So that being the case, we've been talking about the promotion of Okinawa from the 51st year on. I think there are a lot of hope. There are a lot that we can be hopeful about as the time has come. We'll to conclude this symposium session. We'll to conclude the panel session too at this juncture. Thank you for your kind attention. That ends panel session two. We'd like to thank all the panelists as well.